tough on ourselves and tough on our families, but that's not the point. The point is that when it comes to legacy and when it comes to remembrance, you place value on the things that actually matter. And that was the reply that God was giving to the prophet and the community of the prophet. That what this man is looking at is how he's determining legacy is by two things: children and money. And since the prophet didn't have any children that survived him, and he didn't have a lot of money, then he won't be remembered. So leave him alone and abandon him, and eventually his memory is going to die out. So what the Quran again is talking about is really having the right mindset. Not that you cannot be remembered, you should not be remembered, or you should not do something to be remembered after your life. In fact, being remembered is a core part of who we are as human beings. I shared this one time, and some of you may remember this, but there was a gentleman who was working as an emergency responder, and he was sharing some of his experiences. And what his job was to show up as an emergency responder, and whenever there's an accident or something like that, and to assess the situation, and then to determine whether this person who is involved in the accident, can they be revived, or is that it? Is it gone too far that they cannot? And so he says that there were cases where I would find that clearly the person was not going to make it. And so in that situation where I knew that that person was not going to make it, my job was to remain with that person for as long as possible. And most of those times, he said, these people they still had the ability to speak as they were losing their life. They still had their ability to speak and interact. And he said that the toughest thing for me in the beginning, when I first started, was that I did not want to tell people the truth. Because the first thing that they would ask is, am I dying or am I going to make it? And he says, I mean, imagine putting yourself in that situation. He says, the toughest thing was for me to tell a person that I knew was dying that you're going to die. So he said, I would always tell them, you're going to live, don't worry. He says, and that wouldn't happen, and psychologically, that would bother me. I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. How am I telling this person at the last few moments of their life that they are going to live, when I know in reality they're not going to live? So he said, one day I decided to start telling the truth. I came across a young man who was injured in a motorcycle accident. And it was clear that he was not going to survive. And so he asked me, he said, am I going to make it? And he said, at that moment, I made the choice to tell him the truth. He said, I was very afraid because I thought that I would tell him the truth and he would go crazy, he would go insane. He says, I told him the truth and the exact opposite happened. He was at peace. And so he said, after that, I decided that every single time that I came across someone that was in that situation, I was going to tell them the truth. I want to bring them peace. I don't want to have to lie to them and then for me to live with that guilt later on. And so he started telling the truth all the time. And he said, when I started telling the truth, people started revealing things. I started learning things about what people want at the end of their life. And he started talking about different trends. One is that they wanted to feel like the work that they did was meaningful. And one author that writes about this is Viktor Frankl, the author of the book Man's Search for Meaning. He talks about how, and this is a man who is a psychiatrist who survived the Holocaust. And so when he came out of the Holocaust, he wrote about some of the things that he learned while he was in the concentration camp, some of the things that he observed, and how most of the people that were doomed were not the ones that didn't have better access to food, because everybody had the same access to the same food. It was the people who gave up. It was the people who would trade their food, which they needed, they would trade their food for cigarettes. He said, when we saw a guy smoking cigarettes, that means that he's given up. That cigarettes are more important to them than food, and that food is what can keep you going in those situations. So based on his observations, he comes out and he develops this entire field of therapy called logotherapy. And he starts to talk to people about, very existential things. And so he talks about finding meaning and finding purpose in life. And so this emergency responder, he says, one of the trends that I noticed when I started telling the people the truth and they started opening up to me is that they wanted to be remembered. They just wanted to be remembered. He says, I came to a lady who I had never met before in my life. This is the first time she's meeting me at the end of her life. And the question that she asked him is, will you remember me? Imagine. I mean, it's weird to walk up to someone today in the street and say, hey, are you going to remember me? Meeting him for the first time. Or maybe you sit next to him on a plane and after an hour you say, hey, you're going to remember me? But she asked him, are you going to remember me? Why? Because she's finally in that situation where she can reveal what's truly inside of her. So remembrance is a part of who we are. But what the Quran is saying in this verse is remembrance and legacy, you should take into consideration that it's not all about the money that you leave behind and the children that you leave behind. And surely, if you examine the life of the Prophet, all of his children passed away during his life. One remained after and passed away only a few months later. He didn't leave a whole lot of money behind. Narrations tell us that, in fact, he owed people money because he would borrow and he would help people. But the Quran says, "Inna a'tainaka al-kawthar, fasalli li rabbika wanhar." We've given you kawthar, which is an abundance of good. So one narration, just to describe, one narration refers to the kawthar as a pond or a river in the heaven. And it's gifted to the Prophet. And on the Day of Judgment, those who are entering the paradise, the Prophet gives them a cup of this water and quenches their thirst. And so one description in the following, it says, the Kawthar is a river in the garden whose banks are of gold, and it flows over pearls and rubies. Its scent is finer than musk, and its water is sweeter than honey, and it's whiter than milk. Some of you are salivating over this. It's a good sign. That's the gift that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says I've given to the Prophet. Something so unique I haven't given to anybody else. Of course, in our narrations, one definition of that word Kawthar, it's one of the names of Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam. So effectively, God is telling the Prophet that I have put someone in your life who is so special, who is so unique. There is nobody like her. There is no mother like her. There is no spouse like her. There is no daughter like her. There is no friend like her. There is no scholar like her. Ummu Abiha, she is the mother of her father. The 20th of Jamad al-Thani is a day that we celebrate the birth of Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to be among those who receive her intercession. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ وَصَلُّوا عَلَى مُحَمَّدٍ وَآلِ مُحَمَّدٍ. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين نحمده ونسبحه ونقدسه على آلائه ونعمائه ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل وسلم وزد وبارك وترحم على محمد وآل محمد كما صليت وسلمت وباركت وترحمت على إبراهيم وآل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد وصل اللهم وسلم على أوصيائه وخلفائه وعترته علي أمير المؤمنين وقائد الغر المحجلين وعلى البضعة الطاهرة فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين وعلى سبطي نبي الرحمة وسيدي شباب أهل الجنة الحسن والحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والخلف الهادي المهدي عجل الله تعالى فرجه وسهل مخرجه وجعلنا من أنصاره وأعوانه عباد الله أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله عز وجل. Allam al-Majlisi mentions in his chapter on the merits of Fatima Zahra alayhi salam, he says the following. He begins with her birth. And he says that when Khadijat al-Kubra alayhi salam was carrying Fatima in her womb, that the women of Mecca had abandoned her. They had excommunicated her because she had initially gone against their advice. Why? I mean, they had certain expectations. You know, sometimes people have certain expectations, and when you do the right thing, sometimes when you do the wrong thing, you disappoint them, but sometimes when you do the right thing, you also agitate and disappoint some people. And so they did not expect her to marry the Prophet. Why? Because she was a woman who came from wealth, and he was not a man who came from wealth, financially. She was not orphaned. He was an orphan. And so for them, it didn't make sense and it didn't match. And for them, they said that if you do decide to marry him, then forget about our relationship. But she did the thing that was right. So she married the Prophet. And the narration says that when she was carrying Fatima in her womb, the Prophet would hear her speaking. And he would come to the room. And he would say to her, Khadija, who are you speaking with? There's nobody here. And her reply, the narration says that her reply was that I hear the baby in my womb speaking to me. And I'm replying to it, I am speaking to it. And so continues, the narration continues, and it says that when it came time for her to actually give birth, when the pangs of labor, when she began to feel that pain, she went to them again, the woman, in time of dire need. And again they said, no, we won't help you. Not only did they X her out, but they threatened anybody who would associate with her that they would X her out. And at that time that she needed them the most, they turned away from her again. And so the narration tells us that to help her during that time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent 4 women. And those are Sayyidat Nisa al-Alameen, the ones that are mentioned in the Quran. Maryam alayhi salam and Asiya. One narration says the sister of Musa. Another says the mother of Musa, in order to help her with that childbirth. And that she was born, and that when she was born, a light emerged that illuminated all of the city of Mecca. And so the point is that yes, her birth, in which we celebrate, was a very blessed birth. But it happened under unfortunate circumstance, and that her mother had to pay that price. You know, sometimes when God rewards us with something, we have to pay a price first in order to receive that reward. That's definitely the example that we have from the life of the Prophet himself. That's the example that we have from the life of Khadija, and that's also the life. That's also the example that we have from the life of Fatima Zahra alayhi salam. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again to allow us to be among the recipients of her shafa'ah, her intercession. And we send our congratulations to all of those who are celebrating this auspicious occasion, inshallah. Just a couple of announcements before we leave, brothers and sisters. Please note that next week, because of daylight savings time taking effect this Sunday, so next week, the Friday prayers will begin at 1 p.m. sharp. Instead of 12 p.m., 1 p.m. sharp. So if you show up at 12, you'll be very early. You can help with the setup. But the prayer will be at 1 o'clock.